So I've mentioned this in our past episodes several times. Just how do you get a narrative-based statement? Stand by and find out in tip number 40 on Interview and Interrogation 101 Tips. Hey, welcome back. Stan Walters with you again here on 101 Tips for Interviewers and Interrogators. And we've been talking about in all of our episodes, I mentioned quite numerous times about the process that's necessary to get a good statement in interviewing and interrogation, and that's the narrative-based statement. So just what is it and how do we do it and why are we even doing it? So let's start with the last part. Why am I using or starting with a narrative-based statement? Go back first of all and look at our episode we talked about, are you employing SUE, strategic use of evidence? Remember that's going to come back. My objective, my end game for the narrative statement is to garner as much information as I possibly can. Remember that we talked before that there's different types of questions, probing questions, leading questions, and so forth. We want to, in this case, elicit as much information from the subject. By the way, subject in this sense is not only suspect, but victims and witnesses. So this applies across the board. Get as much information from them as I can as possible, so I've got a good sample to work with and a good place to go back and look and find my topic areas. Second purpose here is that we're not least likely to contaminate the subject by using this process. Remember we said in SUE, we hold the evidence as long as possible. We let the subject talk first, then we go back and present, here's what the physical evidence says, or the witnesses say, what the victim says, etc. And you have a higher probability of spotting deception, pushing at 68%, which is what inmates can do just in the raw. Also, another reason we use the narrative-based statement is because it's facilitating the conversation. In many cases, you'll be teaching subjects how to use their memories better. They'll do a better job for you and you will get more information. So you're actually energizing the memory process, and this builds on that and greases the wheels, if you will. It oils up that process and gets a smooth running declaratory memory. And by doing this, the other thing, the final strategy for why I do this, remember subjects we found in previous studies that had been done by other researchers that 80-odd%, about 81, 82% will talk if they're treated with respect, number one, and number two, the interviewer will listen to them. So this sets up that scenario, sets up that air of compliance and cooperation with your subject no matter which role that they're in. So now that's the reason behind doing it. Now here's how we're going to do this. In our four-part narrative philosophy, remember the four phases. There's the orientation process and refining the baseline, get the background, talk non-threatening information, get a sense of verbal and nonverbal behavior. Then we're going to do the narration. From the narration, we'll find our target list that we begin to zero in on issues during the cross-examination phase, then the final piece, the resolution phase. So let's work on this narration first and what specific I'm after. To opening, the questions I will use with my subject are very open-ended. For example, tell, show, describe, explain. That's the type of questions I want to use. Tell me what happened. Tell me about the phone call. Describe what happened when you were going through the closing procedure the other night. Show me what happened. Walk me through the crime scene. Walk me through the room. Walk me through the house. Walk me through the fire scene. Walk me around the vehicle. And show me step by step each point what happened along the way. You facilitate this by the subject, you're letting them talk. Do not interrupt them. Rule number one, don't interrupt them. Even if you know for whatever reason, from evidence or forensics or other interviews, if you suspect they're being deceptive, don't interrupt yet. Wait for that. You will keep track of that. Remember, I'm not looking so much for where the subject's lying. I'm looking for the topic areas that gives them the greatest problem. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. So tell, show, describe, explain. Try to get them. Oh, by the way, this will work obviously with an audio statement, face-to-face video, but it will also work for those who use criteria-based content analysis, like the work with Wes Clark and his group and statement analysis. You're building a baseline. It will work on a written statement also. So look at those principles and it applies the same way. Same type of type, just different venue, but the same analytical process, same value. Okay? So verbal or it could be written, either one. Try to get the subject to start, if you can, a couple of hours before the event. First of all, don't worry, oh my God, this is going to take forever. He's going to start take 2 hours. No. The reason I put them ahead of the event is because I want them in a routine. I want them out of a non-threat area. It starts to warm up, if you will, the process. It begins to warm up the memory process. Great opportunity also to build a baseline. So you get your verbal and nonverbal behavior together, correct? So as a person transitions into the critical events, then they'll be energized when you see problem spots. So later, when you move to cross-examination, those are the places that you will target. Those topic areas, you begin to tighten your Google search and you zero in on that particular issue or those issues. We'll talk more about that in some future episodes that I got planned. I think you're going to like some of the stuff that I'm going to share with you in those future episodes. So tell, show, describe, explain, let them narrate. Now, if they begin to bog down, they kind of slow down or they, what do I do next? You can encourage them by saying, go on, then what, or what happened next, until they get on through the event and finish up. It's okay for a moment if you need a clarification. He says, well, Bob, okay, Bob's last name was, okay, Bob did what? Now go ahead. It's all right to do that. Try not to interrupt with any questions that distracts them away from the issue till they go all through the declaratory process. What about the subject who doesn't want to cooperate? It's going to happen, right? Okay. Here's a tactic. This approach that I've used has been very effective. Do what I call a negative interview. Okay, ask them, for example, have you ever seen this girl before? And tell them. Now, so all I want you to do is say yes or no, nothing else. Don't answer just yes or no, let's get this done, get it out of the way. Have you seen her before? Have you borrowed so-and-so's car? Have you ever been to such and First United controlled Emirates Bank or whatever? Okay. Do you remember this blanket? Who do you work for? And you always get yes or no responses. Embedded in these, you already know the answers to the majority of them. You already know. So I'm doing is setting the subject up. Will they be deceptive at each of those points? Then we'll come back. And when we go to the cross-examination, for example, here's how you would use it. Excuse me. You said that your mother's never seen this girl before. I have a statement from your mom that said you brought this girl to your mom's house and she fixed your dinner. So I'm curious, is your mom making this up? Why would she say that? Now look what's happened to the subject's stability, credibility in the statement, and the cognitive load. You've just now raised the cognitive load, increased the difficulty to maintain deception. With my victims and witnesses, when you begin to do this, their statements get very, very clear. A lot of detail become very precise. Now, the symptoms I'm watching and listening for during this process. Tactics, avoidance tactics subjects use. Look for gaps in time. They'll skip like the next thing or after a while or after a couple hours or a few hours later or all of a sudden they skipped a block of time. That's a problem spot. They'll avoid talking about specific locations. I went to Tom's house, don't know where it is, I just know how to get there. Good. And later we're going to ask, okay, what about his house? Well, I don't know how to get there. Well, how did you get there? And see if they can describe the streets and the turns, the house, etc. They're making up a place, for example. They'll also avoid talking about people. Some guy, I don't know his name. I've seen him before, for example. Two things. It's an imaginary person or it's a person they don't want to identify with. So they'll avoid the connections with specific times, people, places, and variations of that. Remember that the typical deception strategies are omission and embellishment. So let's take a quick review. Open-ended statement. Tell, show, describe, explain. Let them narrate all the way through. You facilitate. You don't challenge. You encourage them to go all the way through without interruption. Creates a better bond. Creates a better connection with the interviewer. By doing this, you don't contaminate with evidence up front. And you also create that connection with the subject. They're willing to work with you. So practice this. Take a look. By the way, if you look up a cases, I know for a fact this is how they were able to get Susan Smith in the death of her two sons, because she told a big story and miscalculated some of the spots where she was lying. She didn't realize that she had misidentified things in the evidence, and that's how they knew there was a problem in her case. Now, let's say you get the narrative all the way through, and you start to challenge the cross-examination part, which we'll do later, and they won't talk. Are you screwed? No. You've already now got, and this is when, by the way, when I would record the statement. This is what the recording's for. I would even do this if they're going to give their alibi. I know you said you weren't there. What were you doing that day, for example? And tie them down specifically. Say, hey, you got to have this alibi. We got to make dead sure it's rock solid if you want to defend yourself. Okay, and I'll get them to lock down that deceptive alibi statement. Later, I can destroy their credibility because I've got this, this, and this. So I just strategically use my evidence later to prove where the subject's being deceptive along the way. So just wanted you to see how the narrative process I've talked about. Everybody worries about, oh my God, what do I say during an interview? If you're worried about what you say, that's your problem. You do too much saying and not listening. Narrative interviews are non-guilt assumptive, non-confrontational, information gathering oriented type of interviews. Super. Be sure to hit the like button down here so I can pass this around, and hit the share button. Click the share, embed us in emails for the email that this came in that you got. Send out to other folks that are encouraged to need this type of training or want to refine or enhance the interviewing skills. Remember, I'm looking for those people who've had no training. Now they're losing cases. Training's not functioning, so they're having problems with cases. They want to enhance their skills, or they're having legal issues, and now they're subject to large multi-million-dollar lawsuits. That's my perfect audience. So if you're looking for a class and want to use your folks, your agency, be sure to contact me, and I'll be glad to work with you on that. Hit the subscribe button here. Again, other resources at the website that you can make available to yourself and your fellow officers and fellow investigators. I'm going to work at this until every investigator becomes a go-to interviewer that gets the facts. See you next time. Be safe.